This week in CIST 1510, we'll look at Chapter 6, Responsive Design Part 2. This week we're going to be designing for the tablet and desktop devices. So when we get through with this chapter, you'll be looking at how to identify and use media query expressions. We'll explain the design principles of a tablet website, sort of media query to target tablet viewpoints, create a style rule for a tablet viewport. We'll look at the design principles of a desktop website. We're going to insert a media query and create style rules that target desktop viewports. We're also going to put a media query in and create a style rule for large desktop viewports. Remember the media queries. We're going to determine what part of the CSS is used based on the size of the device that are viewing it. We will create a media query for print, identify and modify breakpoints. We're going to look at adding a dynamic pseudo classes to a website. We'll look at linear and radial gradients, and then apply a linear gradient to a web page for the desktop viewport. All right, so last week we looked at the mobile first approach. That focuses on styling content appropriately for smaller mobile devices. Mobile first strategy is going to use a single column layout and to prevent horizontal scrolling and minimize vertical scrolling. Now the design process for tablets and desktops, they allow more flexibility with the web page layout. So when we design layouts for tablets and desktops, the displays, it's going to be simplified through the use of the media queries. They're going to be essential for our responsive design because they are going to let you customize the layouts for various viewport sizes. Once again, the mobile first approach, since it does use the single column layout, it's going to create a more enjoyable experience for your mobile users. While as the designing for desktops and tablets will give you more flexibility as far as designing for larger screens. We'll see our roadmap to our chapter this week. We'll add tablet media queries and styles, desktop media queries and styles, modify the viewport breakpoints, insert and style pseudo classes, and add linear gradients. All right, so the responsive web design principles, these are applied to a website. You can do this by editing the site style sheet so that we include media queries that will apply styles that are specific to tablet and desktop viewports. Media queries, they're inserted to detect a tablet size viewport or a desktop size viewport. So they detect the media type and the capabilities of the devices the browser is running on. Now from there, they will look and say, okay, this is the size of the device. So we'll look and see what styles we have set that are going to work best for that situation. So you can apply styles in here that move, hide, display content on page, change the text or colors, or any other type of style that makes it easier to read based on the particular situation that it is being viewed in. So we see here an example of a basic example of media query. It's going to be inserted into a link tab of the HTML page. And so we see the link, spreadsheet, 8 CSS styles, the media set to screen versus media versus set to print. So based on how it's being viewed will determine what CSS is going to be used. Now, when you add a style rules that target tablet or desktops, viewpoints in particular, you're going to need a media query for each viewpoint will need to be created. And they do allow the application of different CSS styles. You will put these into, you will embed the media queries in a link tag that we just looked at. So we will embed these into the link tab. It's going to connect that external CSS style sheet to our HTML file. You can also just insert these in the external style sheet itself. Now, a breakpoint, that's what this does is it's set to understand the code and syntax of how a media query detects the viewport size. So it knows what point at which a web page is required to change. It uses logical expressions to test whether a viewport has reached that particular breakpoint. So for this, you got different styles that can be applied to a web page. That can cause it to change in a way that makes it easier to read and navigate for a particular viewport. So we'll see some examples of media queries, and the typical minimal viewport width and maximum based on the sizes would determine which CSS we're using for that device. As I said, media queries, they use the logical expression to test whether a viewport has reached a particular breakpoint. This includes the name of the media query feature, characteristics of the environment, and also the breakpoint value to be tested. So in those, if any of the logical expressions elevates to true, the media query applies the style that follows it. Okay, we did look and see that it did have the minimum and maximum breakpoints, or the viewport width, listed in this screen here. So that can also be used to test for both the minimum and maximum breakpoints. So we see the example in this link. So they got the style sheet, the link, and then in this, they're testing for the minimum width and to the maximum width. So if the device that is viewing the web page falls within that screen size, in that case, it's going to say, okay, we're going to add these rules that are applied in the CSS to this device that meets this criteria. Now, when you're testing for the minimum and maximum width, you want to make sure that the word "and" is used to separate each part of the media attribute value. So we're saying it's making sure that it meets this and this setting. Now, another way we can put in our media queries is to code them directly into a single CSS file, and we use the @media rule. This is the most common types are going to be user, screen, print, and all. Some different expressions we have. Features we can use here is, like, for example, the max width, minimum width. That's going to be the width of the viewport in pixels. We can also search the media, query the media with the resolution, the height, or the orientation. Now we add media queries to an external style sheet. We're going to do our mobile first queries to begin with. They're going to list first. They're going to be our default styles. These are used to add styles for larger viewports. So we're going to progress from tablet to desktop. I recommend that you start with your smallest screen and go to the largest. So in this, you would modify the appearance of an element for a larger viewpoint. You have a media query that's going to be created for the larger viewpoint. Then a new style will be created in that viewport. All right, so with tablets, you really can't have it's difficult to design to a one-size-fits-all layouts for tablet devices based off the sizes. So we would create a using responsive web design. You're going to design multiple table layouts. I'm sorry, you will not have to design multiple table layouts when you use the responsive web design. So you're going to look and say if this tablet has a viewport smaller than the minimum size specified in the mobile query, in that case, the layout is going to default to the mobile viewport layout. You're going to set the minimum and maximum settings for your tablets, as we see in this screen here. So we're going to set our comments. In this case, we're setting just the medium width, minimum width of the tablet. This is something also you can set once you go to the next size. You can set the next medium width, and if the screen size falls between, in this case, 630, and then whatever the minimum width is in the next set of rules, this is what will be applied. When you design for a tablet view, you want to maintain the same color scheme, text, general look at the website, and you want to make sure that it kind of stays the same from viewport to viewport. So really the only thing that really should change may be the layout and placement of the content. Our navigation design for tablet viewport. Now with this, it's not going to be necessary to maintain a vertical list of navigation buttons as we have for the mobile devices, because your tablet screen is going to be larger than a smartphone. So you can align the navigation buttons in a horizontal line, which is going to free space up for more content below the navigation area. This is something that's going to be done to improve the visibility, because then it's going to display the content in the middle of the screen, or the navigation in the middle of the screen. You can create a style rule to display the navigation list items in a single horizontal line when it's displayed in a tablet view. So we see an example in this layout. So we have a style rule for navigation list item last child. So in this case, we're setting the border right to none. Then we have a style rule for the nav list item anchor for the tablet viewport, setting the padding. All right, so this is the About Us page through your chapter. It's designed for a tablet viewport. A contact page. Notice that the telephone link is now hidden. Okay, so that in your CSS, since it's not being used as a mobile device, that is now no longer a clickable link. All right, so when you design for desktop viewport, this provides you an opportunity for multiple column layouts, because our desktop screens are often wider than we are dealing with our mobile devices or our tablets. So today's modern desktop monitors, they come in many shapes and sizes. Now, one thing is, as the viewport size increases, the layout of the website is degraded. But when you're designing for a web page for desktop, you want to use simple, intuitive navigation. You want to make sure you have clear images and apply the same color scheme. You want to give your website a cohesive feel through all these devices that you're going to be viewing the website on. So you want to maintain the same look and feel of the site, but you may have to change some formatting to accommodate the desktop viewport. So we see an example of the About Us page in the desktop viewport, and then the media query for large viewports. Notice how that we have a lot of space on the sides. As we see, the viewport size here is set to 2560 pixels. Now, not only can media queries help make mobile-friendly web pages, you can also use that to create printer-friendly web pages. So we see an example of a media query for print. Let's zoom in here. All right, so same concept of the page we have about us for our viewport for design that we designed for the desktop viewport, and the mobile or the tablet, excuse me, viewport. This one is ready for print. So we would apply the print media query in the CSS for this. All right, so if you recall that a breakpoint, that's the point which you apply different styles to the web page. And that's something that's going to be usually dependent on the viewport, and it's going to determine the content on the page. Okay, these can be modified. So developers are going to set the breakpoints based on the content of the page. Pseudo classes, we'll talk about dynamic pseudo classes. This is going to allow you to change the style of an element or a link based on the link states. Whether the link is visited, you're hovering over the link, whether it is a link or where it's active. That must be used in the following order. It must be used as link, visit, hover, and active. So we see the pseudo class for this. We see that we have link that's used to as an unvisited link. We set the pseudo class for visited, or when it's been clicked. Hovers when the mouse is hovering over it, and active is the link at the moment it is clicked. The pseudo classes, it's going to be attached to a selector, and in there you have with a colon. It's going to specify a state or relation to the selector, and so give the web developer more control over that selector. We'll see an example here. The style rules, for example, the anchor, link, a visit, a hover, a active. So that's going to combine those with the applying the pseudo classes to those elements. That's stuff that's not necessary to use all of the pseudo classes. Even if it is omitted from the design, you want to make sure that you do have it maintain the same order of the pseudo class styles in the CSS code. So, for example, this is something that's going to be often used in the desktop viewport, not so much in the mobile and tablet, since they don't have the option to hover or click. So we see an example of this. For example, they are using the hover pseudo class over the home, and there's the background colors are going to turn white, and text is going to turn to black. So it lets the user know that this is the link they're about to click. Now gradients, they are going to have a gradual transition from one color to another. We have two types for CSS. We have our linear gradient. This can be used where you transform from several different angles. The default transition is going to be from top to bottom, but you can also transition up, left, right, or diagonally. You also have radial gradients. These are going to be specified by their center. And in the radial gradients, the colors are going to begin at the center. And as you transition out in a radial direction, it's going to transition from one color to another. Now with the gradients, you have to have at least 2 colors or specified. So an example of a gradient applied to a web page here. As we see that we start with one color and fade into another. We have the transition starting right around in here. This is a linear gradient. All right, so in this chapter, we finished up looking at media queries, creating the media queries that's going to target our tablets and our desktops. We also looked at the gradients, modifying breakpoints. We're going to look at the chapter lab for this week. I have uploaded in Blackboard. You come to the chapter 6 folder. I do have your starting documents here. It is a zip file. So in this, when you start your chapter 6 lab, you will not have your folder here. So I'm going ahead and just delete mine. Okay, so to upload these files, I want to make sure I come to Workspace and the folder actions. I'm going to come into New File. I'm going to click my Upload button. Now, I'm going to download the file that I just, or upload the file I just downloaded from Blackboard. It's going to be a zipped folder. I'm just simply going to double click that. I'm going to tell it to extract and delete. So now my files from chapter 5 are now loaded into chapter 6. This is some process you will be doing every week, uploading the files to your Striker cord, and those files will be provided for you each week. And then you will continue your work through the chapter with your tasks that are in your lab. A lot of the lab itself, you're creating style rules for the tablets. You're creating style rules for your desktop viewport. You're also adding mobile into your contact. This should be the only HTML page that you really work with. It does provide you with other code, additional code that you will add in as well.